Welcome to Wisdom Exchange TV. My name is Suzanne F Stevens, Chief Edge Optimizer for the Ignite Excellence Group of Initiatives. One of our key initiatives is the Ignite Excellence Foundation, where we invest, develop, and inspire future women leaders, particularly in emerging countries. With that goal in mind, we produce Wisdom Exchange TV, where we interview pioneers, trailblazers, leaders of many in politics, philanthropy, education, and business. And today we have a real treat with somebody new that we haven't interviewed in the architectural business. We are actually in Cape Town, South Africa today with Gita Goven, CEO and founder of ARG Design. Gita is one of the South Africa's foremost sustainability thinkers, a founding partner and CEO of ARG Design. She has pioneered in practice of social and environmental transformation design that includes landmark projects such as the MiCiti Bus Station, the Gcabi Transport Interchange, among several others. ARG Design engages the disciplines of urban design, planning, environmental management, architecture and landscape architecture, and water and food security systems. ARG Design and Gita have received numerous awards and accolades for their work in sustainability-built environments. Gita was the second Black woman in South Africa to qualify as an architect and remains one of the few Black women to head up an interdisciplinary architectural and urban design practice. Since she currently chairs the team of West Cape Rejuvenation Settlement designed project to build 200,000 households in a rejuvenated city extension to the city of Cape Town. Quite a project. But we're not here to talk about all your achievements because there are many and way too many for me to actually ask you about. I want to learn about you and your impression of the architecture in Cape Town and your experience as a woman in such a field. So what was the catalyst to becoming an architect?
I grew up in a small apartheid town and was quite aware that the architecture in the poorer parts or the black parts of the cities and towns was much poorer than central CBDs and other places. And so I saw the opportunity to be involved in something where you could make the daily lives of people much richer by engaging in the form of the place that was made, the way in which the landscape of those places worked, and just how one could feel comfortable in really great places. So that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was looking for the kind of creativity that could begin to create those spaces and create those opportunities of experience of well-being.
I've had the pleasure of going to 15 countries and there's tons of creativity. But I haven't met someone yet who has actually said creativity architecture. Often what ends up happening is creativity beading, creativity textiles. So for a woman, and being the second woman to actually pursue this sort of career in Cape Town, why did you want creativity in architecture? What was it about architecture beyond the creativity that drew you to this profession?
Now, when I think about it, it's about the opportunity to really get the understanding between what creates the parameters for people to experience being in a great setting, that really makes them shine, that enables them to do the things that they're doing. When I started thinking about architecture, I didn't realize that. I thought it was about drawing and making really beautiful buildings, or drawing them and then getting them built. And certainly one did that for a while, and it was really interesting. But as I grew older and I started looking closer, I realized that you could draw them one way or you could draw them another way. And I started understanding better that form making was a really interesting way in which you could understand that relationship between people and their spaces. And that's the creative part that's really, really interesting. It's how the spaces influence the behavior of people and enhance those opportunities for living and playing and really leading great lives.
You were alluding to, before we started the interview, in regards to being of Indian descent. And being an architect probably wasn't the path that was set out for you by your parents. perhaps, as you were alluding to, is, pre-arranged marriage, and I've had the pleasure of meeting your lovely husband that you selected.
Yes, absolutely.
Or he selected you. We can have that conversation later on.
That's a debate.
But how did you go from that reality to the reality that you have today?
That reality that I grew up in was one where I was told to keep quiet, listen, and be a good wife, and really learn all the skills to be able to fit into a society and get on with it and live with the rules. And from when I was very little, it was quite clear for me that that was not going to satisfy my yearning for learning and for exploring and for really being curious about finding out how the world works. So what I started doing was I started reading a lot from a very young age. And suddenly, from being locked in a small little town where there wasn't even a public library that I could access, I had access to this incredibly big world of ideas and opportunity. And as I did that, my parents started seeing this, and fortunately, they were committed to education. So my dad said to me that I will not leave you with wealth necessarily, but I will stand with you until you find your own space to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and fend for yourself in the world, whatever you choose. And that belief in me was the biggest gift I could get. And that's the gift that I have carried with me. And it hasn't been without difficulty with my family directly, where they would have liked me to just settle down and play by the rules. But at the same time, it took courage on their part, but it took even more courage on my part as a young woman to say, I'm going to step out of the comfort zone of my family. I'm going to go into a university where I have to apply for a permit to go to university, be the first black woman in that university to apply for architecture and do what it takes to get there. At that point, I didn't have access to transport. I didn't have access to a drawing board. I shared a bedroom with 4 other people. And I had to work within these circumstances to learn what I need to learn and make sure that I got there. And I was determined, because there was no ways that I was going to just settle down and be in an arranged marriage. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just had this yearning for learning and growth and being able to be active in a different way.
And it's really interesting, too, that you're saying that you had to change the mindset of your parents.
Absolutely.
And the good news is that they did change their mindset based on your commitment.
Yes.
Why do you think there are so few women in the leadership role that you have created?
When I started studying architecture, it was very much perceived as a man's profession. There weren't a lot of women that one was aware of. I certainly knew of no women in any professions, because I came from the kind of context where the only women that were in professional positions were either teachers or they were nurses, and there was one person in my community that was a doctor, and it was exceptional because she had studied overseas. So I think for many people, for many women in Africa, we come from the kind of lives where our natural exposure to people in professional lives is very limited. More broadly speaking, people who have had an opportunity to be in a more affluent society, in a more professional society, you may see that, but the social norms are such that they often do dictate what is perceived of as a man's profession or a woman's profession. I think that's changing a lot now, but for many young women it's still the case. I think there's also often a concern about what it's going to be like for when you get married or have a family, and how you will work that out. And again, I found that if I worried about that at that point, I wouldn't have done what I've done now. But going through everything I've had to deal with, motherhood, having a family, and still being able to be a leader in my profession, you work it out. You make a plan, and you put all that support in place that can actually allow you to do what you need to do. And it's not easy, but if you're playing a game that you're really interested in and willing to really just make that difference, then you will do what it takes to make it happen.
Now, do you think there's an opportunity for women in architectural and design and urban planning that we may bring naturally to a situation? And not to make this about men versus women, but some of the natural skills that we have as women, do you think there's an advantage or a disadvantage in the arena, your area of expertise?
That's a very difficult question. My perception is that There are women who come from a much softer space of understanding the way in which people respond to their environments, the way people interact in their relationships with each other in a professional setting or in a domestic setting. For me, it's much more helpful to think about it from the perspective of whether we bring feminine energy or male energy in the work that we do. And there are a lot of men that I work with who bring really great feminine energy into the work that we do. So for me, the leadership is about bringing more feminine energy in the work that we do. Really looking for those opportunities to connect with people at an individual level, to bring more nurturing and love and courage and wisdom in what we do. That it's not only about the money, it's really about appreciating those qualities of human beings, those softer qualities of society, those softer qualities of spaces and places that really allow one to experience the joy and comfort of being alive every day and engaging with each other and having fun as we do what we do. So that's the kind of stuff that I think a lot of women can bring. But as I said, it's about that feminine energy that we bring in, which is not so hard-edged. Hard-edge is good, but it has its place. And it's about really being able to understand when you draw on the feminine energy and when do you draw on that male energy. So when I do need to be straight and forthright, I can be like a real dictator, and that's necessary. But for a lot of the time, we can achieve a lot with just love and courage.
You know, and I really like what you're saying there too. I've always had this theory, I like men with a little woman in them.
Yes.
and that is true in all leadership.
Yeah.
That's true in any project. You need to be able to balance that feminine and masculine energy, no matter if you're a man or a woman, in order to be successful. I think that's an excellent point. What are some of the core competencies that you need to be a successful architect?
I think you need to firstly be interested in what that world of architecture is about. And often it's about, for a lot of young people, even if they come from a background of a lot of professional exposure, those subjects are not ones that you can understand what they really are about. So it's important to go out there and see how that world of architecture works. And today there are many different roles you can play within architecture. So, for example, what I do is I'm very, very good conceptually at understanding problems and being able to link the kinds of spatial solutions to problems. I am not necessarily interested in the technical detailing of buildings. Some architects are interested in the technical detailing of buildings. So I would really encourage young people to go out there and spend time in an architectural office, job shadow whenever you can, but go and find out all the different roles that are played in the making of the built environment. There are many, many different roles. And it's not just architecture as a discipline, but there's a suite of disciplines that work together. So it's engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, planning. Each one of these have got different strengths and different perspectives that they bring that work together in the making of the built environment. So when you start having an understanding of what that does, you can begin to understand what fits for you, what really excites you about what's going on there. So for example, some of the women in my practice, one in particular, loves policy. She loves to understand how policy and regulation can create the built environment. So when I need something to be done in that arena, I can have a great conversation with her and say, Tully, how do we do this? How do we work out the creation of this space that is within the regulatory framework and the policy framework of what we're wanting to do and push the boundaries to make it really amazing? So that's where I'll get that advice. When I need advice about urban design, I will go and talk to Bronwyn in my practice, and I'll say, Bronwyn, we are needing to create this really amazing space. How, from an urban design perspective, can you share with me the making of this space that will really create this urban room that will be vibrant and amazing with a fantastic public space? And my partners in my practice are also really great at that. And then I will talk to the landscape person and say, if we think about landscape, really also just creating this incredible urban space, how do we bring the qualities of landscape into the urban design thinking so that when we make this space, you begin to appreciate this as the most incredible setting where there's a play of building and public space and landscape where you can feel like you the jewel in that setting, that the space was made for you, that the interaction that you're having with people is on the one hand both memorable, but it's also very human scaled and very human related, that it builds that relationship quality between individuals, or if it's even just a one-to-one conversation, or in a group.
In traveling through Africa and looking at Cape Town, there's a lot of opportunity now, I would think, for planning, creating the space that you're actually talking about.
Yeah.
Would you agree that there's been a lot of development, but more money's coming to countries in many ways, particularly in Southern Africa? There is more money. There's more that infrastructure is becoming more and more and more important. Is this a great time to get involved?
It's a perfect time to get involved. If I give you an example of a small little project that we did in the township in Kailicha, we had a small budget that was linked to the 2010 World Cup process. It's only about 2 million rand, and it was a project that was funded by Architecture for Humanity. They wanted to create a small facility to stimulate football in the townships. And an amazing partnership came together of various people. We won a competition to design this little building. But what was phenomenal about this partnership was to bring space making with the programmatic aspect, with the way in which the space worked within a township context. And so there's an urban park with an astroturf field and a tiny little building that creates the space inside of which a whole lot of activities happen. And today what happens is that from very early in the morning till late at night, and 7 days a week, you get the little children coming in the morning. Then you get the primary school children coming. In the late afternoon, you get the older kids, and in the evenings, you get the young men. And they're using football as a medium to create fun and recreation and life skills learning. It's teaching about HIV/AIDS. It's teaching about tuberculosis, which is a really big problem. It's teaching about gender relationships between boys and girls and men and women. And it's creating the kind of engagement that is keeping the men away from alcohol and substance abuse and violence and whatever else. So it's really that quality of not just the making of the built environment, but the purpose-driven making of the built environment is what I find really, really exciting.
And do you think it's the architects and planners' responsibility to have a social consciousness to create these sorts of opportunities?
Certainly when you do that, we've had buildings which we've won international awards for, and they are, in some of the cases, uninhabited still, because the purpose for which they were designed wasn't realized, because the particular community in that instance was funded by a donor fund, and that fund came to an end for various reasons. So it's really unfortunate. For me, it's an empty glory to have an accolade or an award for a building, and the actual purpose for which the building was built is not realized. So we're going back to that community and supporting them in regenerating their program. And it was interesting because this building we designed, it was a green eco-center, and it was a tiny building, and we said, what could this building do? And we used two concepts to design this building. We said, if we could demonstrate in this building that you could use recycled material that you can find in your local area and reclaim it from the dump and build a really amazing and beautiful building, what would that do? And we did that, and the people of that community said, we always thought these were poor men's materials, and we now realize that actually they can make really beautiful buildings, and now a whole lot of buildings in the township are being built in that way. The second lot of materials we used are materials that are growable in that area. And again, when people see it in the buildings, they said, now we realize we can actually use these materials in our buildings. So what's happened now is that they have started realizing that the way in which the building is made has a relationship to the environment that the materials come from. So this idea of the building actually having a direct play with its climate, its people, its real physical context, and what is actually a renewable resource or a sustainable resource in that perspective really becomes exciting and real for the people in their everyday lives in a township context. So there isn't really, for me, a formula about architecture. There isn't really a prescription about architecture. It's about being able to find the deeper purpose and the deeper experience in any building, be it an office or be it any other space. So this space, for example, in my office is a very important space because it's a social space. And what that social space does is it unlocks those informal exchanges, which actually builds community and really gets us to the heart of the matter and the heart of the people that matter, so that we can then from there create what is actually worth and important to create.
You mentioned this building, and I'm curious, often as professionals, we embark down a road and our plans don't get executed as we intended, or the building doesn't get used for what we intended. Is there anything that you would do differently now in hindsight of that project? I mean, you fixed the problem, it sounds like
We're in the process of
yes,
fixing the problem.
which is great.
Yes.
But is there anything that you could have done in advance to ensure the building gets used towards the purpose that it was intended?
Something that we've started doing now is that I've realized that just building buildings in the African context is not enough, especially if it's public buildings. And our passion in my practice is to design public buildings, really great public buildings, because through the public buildings, you can really change the agenda of what happens in communities. But we realize that the building alone cannot change the agenda. You have to be able to create the partnerships that allow you to intervene in the actual programs of those buildings. What happens in those buildings? And so now Community Grow, which is the new agency that I am chairing and am a founder of, and there are 5 partners that are bringing this together, are bringing in those skill sets where we can begin to infuse those pillars that are capable of building community. Because the challenge in Africa is more so than the buildings, the rebuilding of community. And how do you do that? So what we've done is we are looking at, firstly, how do you stimulate the local economy? And how do you work with what is in that context to position the economy? We look at governance. What are the rules of the game that make things more workable or not? We look at economy. So I've said economy. We look at education. And education is not just the school stuff. So certainly it is school, but one of the things that we battle with in many of our, particularly the poorer areas, is teenage pregnancy. How do you create the kind of educational system that firstly will reduce that problem, and secondly will not close the options for this young person, for whatever reason has fallen into this life circumstance, that they can complete their education and still be able to fulfill really great lives? Because we have a youth bulge in Africa, and that youth bulge is currently unemployable. How do we actually still now change that game so that they become employable and are able to be the economic force of this continent? Because they are. They can be, and we can actually shift this. So it's the education. The health underpins that all completely. We have children who go to school who are not even, they don't get 3 meals a day. How can you expect to educate a child that doesn't get 3 meals a day? So having built that building, and having had that experience of it not actually fulfilling its mission, we're now going back and saying, from the position that I have managed to create in my practice, that enables me to put the energy now into creating that, how do I stimulate that set of things that then brings the building, the program, the operations, and the governance all together?
It almost sounds like not only are you building the building, and maybe I'm not understanding, but you're also filling it.
Yes.
So you're building it and filling it with the programs that will actually have an impact on that community.
Absolutely. And I won't be filling it. The community will be filling
Right.
it, supporting that process. Absolutely.
Now, that is going a little bit beyond the call of...
Beyond architecture. Beyond architecture.
So when you think of yourself...
Yes.
Do you think of yourself... How do you think of yourself?
I've stopped trying to label what I do. I do what's important. But I recognize very clearly the skill sets I come from. And however, the life experience I've had has been so phenomenal. I grew up in a context, in a community that had very few external supports for accessing that education. The education I got was from a great community with fantastic leaders, many of whom didn't even speak proper English, my mother being one of them. So learning is not a function of education. Learning is a function of wisdom. So it's being able to bring those life lessons into looking at how we reposition this, being able to access those indigenous knowledge systems, being able to position them and use those people who are able and enable them more in that context. In addition to that, then still give them the platform, especially the younger folk, so that they can up their game, they can get that professional backing as well, because it is important. so that they have the qualification and the certification to be able to advance in life.
Do you see now any obstacles for women to become planners or architects? Are these like real obstacles? Are they still there?
I think mostly, if I look back even on my life, we often have more space than we actually realize we have to grow and learn. And those obstacles are often what we are willing to listen as the negative messages in our society. If we stay committed to what we believe and push the boundaries of our own learning, then nothing stands in the way. And we can create that nothing stands in the way. That doesn't mean that you don't encounter the obstacles. You will encounter the obstacles. So when I designed a building down the road here, which was one of the first buildings that was designed for the qualifying rounds of the Olympic bid in 1993, the chief architect of the city of Cape Town said to me, "Oh, but you didn't know how to design that building, did you?" Well, not only did my practice, with me as the leader, design that building, but we actually empowered the white company that was supposed to be empowering us with the computer programs, because we could leapfrog what they were doing. They had invested so much money in the old technologies that as young people, we could come in and by hook or crook, we got access to the new technologies and the new computer programs and the new ways of thinking, and we brought that in. We couldn't do what we did without their support. But that younger generation and the fresh energy was able to build on the support of the old energy, and my job was to structure that conversation where we weren't working in conflict. When we worked together, we got the best of both, because they were coming from the worldview of saying, you can't do this, it's never been done. You can't build a building that's 60 meters wide as a pavilion in a park. And I said, why not? And we created this incredible building, which is 60 meters long, and it feels like a pavilion in the park with a third world budget for a first world competition.
We talk a lot about small, mid-sized organizations. Do you see any barriers for women like yourself to take your business of 25, 30 employees and bringing it even larger, not only for you, but for women sort of in that mid-range, and actually becoming a large organization?
I think the journey of growing from a one-person practice to 5 to 10 to 25 has had very interesting steps. And what I've learned over time, because what I did was I set out for myself a program of finding the best practices in the city and interviewing them and getting acquainted with the leaders of those practices and being in conversation with them around what it took them to build their practices. And really just asking them to share with me their lessons about what they understood about the building of their practices. And I came to realize that there were a couple of really interesting tools that they used around how they structured their businesses. And they were very happy to share that with me. And this was great, because they didn't see me as competition. I'm still not necessarily competition, because the kind of work I choose to do is not the work that they want to do. They want to do architecture with a capital A. I want to do architecture with a C for community. But I was able to learn from them, and they were very generous. And they were willing to share that for me. Most people say to me, how can you ask something like that? And I said, why not? I want to know, how do you run your systems in your office? How is your office manager trained? So I got that from them, and I set that up in my own practice. Then in addition to that, I have this incredible business coach. And what I realized is that at this stage of the game, it's less about what I do than what I cause to be done. So I have to invest in training my leadership team and being sure that I create the space for them to be really great. When they are really great and they shine and they feel like they've made it happen, I've won. And so that's what I have to do. And I have to cascade that down to the last person in my practice that has entered with the least amount of skill and really make them shine as well. So quite a lot of the time that I spend between myself and my two other partners is around how we work as a team. I am the kind of trailblazer, the kind of person with the lamp heading out there and opening up the space to create really amazing projects. My business partner, who's also my husband, is the guy with the kind of strategic perspective that keeps the whole operational strategy in place. And our third partner is the gifted designer who translates the kind of vision and the concepts that I come with into the tangible designs. And that team together, working with our second leadership team and then working with the leaders of the projects, really works very well. And I have to be sure that if I do nothing else and I do that and really put out into the market what we are committed to, like we are really committed to this, it's a fantastic game, it's an exciting game, so much so that our clients come back to us and say, we really had fun working with you. It was amazing, we learned so much. And we create this fun and exciting and amazing space. We all have a great time and we come out the other end doing really great work.
So sustainability and community is a lot of where you'll focus
Yes.
your attention.
Yeah.
Where I'm guessing with the capital A,
Yeah.
is pay more.
Yeah, possibly.
But I could be wrong.
Possibly. It's a very tough economic climate at the moment. I think the pay more has gone out of the window for a lot of people. What's happening is that the people with the capital A are now interested in doing the work with the capital C or the small c, because that's actually where the need is, especially in Africa.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to share what we do, because I think we have quite a unique chemistry in the work that we do, where we bring a very embedded perspective, a very socially and economically embedded perspective, which is about how you create appropriate solutions, how do you use appropriate materials, and how do you really bridge those divides between people who have lived all of their lives for generations in the outside of the economies, in the outside of formal systems and regulated systems, and people who have been inside of it. That bridge is a really, really important place. And I think for a lot of people like me, if we can be those bridges, that's the really important thing for us to be able to do.
Can you tell us any of your strategies on keeping your employees engaged and in line with your vision?
There are moments in growing the organization when you stretch yourself, and as you're stretching yourself, you have to put into place how you stay connected with your team. Because as you stretch yourself, you can't assume that your team is following you. So what we've done is we've worked through really sharing, we as partners, our vision for our lives as individuals and what we are committed to, and then getting each team member in our practice to think about what is it that they are committed to and passionate about, and how do we find that common purpose. And then to drive that common purpose, what are the skills that we need? And it's about, on the one hand, providing the supports, but on the other hand, also challenging. So right now, we've just had our reviews of all of the people in our practice, and they are saying, Madam Leader, you are out there, and we are not getting your light. We're missing your light. And I'm saying, great, you will get my light, but you will have to come to me too. I'm not only going to be the one who's going to do the coming to you. It's going to be a two-way process. So I want to see what are you going to do to raise your game. And I'm going to create the space for you to really be great in that game. And the supports that I give you is that I will bring the coaching, both personally. So I have, in fact, until very recently, I never had a door. I worked inside the studio, and all of my partners, we work in the studio with everybody, and we encourage everybody to overhear every conversation, because there's not enough space in a day with the kind of work that we do to be able to share the wisdom even in the everyday exchange that you go on with. So that's one of the things that we do. The second thing that we do is we have an open door policy. So anything that you're working with, you've got to just step in and work it out straight away. And then people work with a buddy system. So you also use each other to stimulate the conversation and deal with what you're dealing with. We have Friday programs where we invite people in the community who are doing interesting and work that might be of interest to us to understand better what we do. We invite them to come and share what they do. And then we also encourage everybody in our practice to participate in conferences, to give presentations in conferences, because it forces you to think about what you're doing. So just now we've had 3 of our planners who've been to the planning conference and delivered 3 papers on the work that we've done. And my challenge to them is, when you present to a conference, I don't want to hear what you did. I want to hear what you did differently and what you didn't get right that you still have to get right. So that's how we challenge people to really raise their game and engage with what they're doing. And then we've really encouraged everybody to feel completely free to come and challenge us about what we're doing. So if there's this gap between what I'm saying and what I'm doing, and much of the benefit currently of what I'm doing is actually with my external partners, the question I'm asking my team is, I'm creating that future space that you're going to have to fill. So what are you now going to start doing so that you can start creating that, filling that gap then what would you like to demand as a support? And I will provide it. And I will tell you what I think is possible in that space. But you're going to have to do the thinking.
Now, do you sit down and have those sorts of conversations, or is that just a broad philosophy?
No, so every Monday we have a team leaders meeting where we discuss these things, and the team leaders meetings are themed. The first Monday of every month, we have a 3-hour-long session with the entire staff body, and we do something inspirational and we share the values of some of the projects that we are working with, so even the juniors get to understand what we're dealing with. And now we've started a formal tea session, so we come down to the social space every day for 15 minutes, but we use that time to share what's going on. There's been a breakdown in this project or something hasn't worked, and you learn as much from the things that haven't worked. In fact, you learn more from the things that haven't worked than from the things that work, because that's the space that we've got to then fill and the stuff that we've got to transform. And then we have one-on-one, especially with my team leaders. I have to keep challenging them because we've got to all evolve our styles and the way in which we work. We've got to first understand who we are and our natural animal instinct about how we work, and then transform that for the game that we are playing. And so we engage with this with our leaders, and we bring in highest quality coaching from the market to do that.
If you were to reflect on your career, what is the most significant impact that you feel you've made to date?
About 5 years ago, we realized that we would have to create the projects that we want to see. The projects that are emerging out of the market and out of the circumstances of the market are not adequate for the transformational game that we want to play. And so that's the impact that we've made. We said, my partners and I, about 5 years ago, that we are going to start defining the projects that we're going to make. And it was around about that time that I met the person who was driving the Westgate project when he invited me on that project. And when he came back to me, I said to him, I don't want you to have undue expectations of what you think I can do, because I'm not a superwoman. And he said to me, are you passionate about making a difference in the way the urban fabric and the social fabric of cities work? And I said, yes. He said, do you think you know a lot about it? I said, I probably know a lot more than most people I know around me, because I just make it my business to read and to engage in conversation, and only engage in the kind of activity that opens up that space for me. And I travel a lot, and I'm engaged in conversations with people around the world around those themes and subjects. So, that's now. So when he came to me and he said, I want you to be my partner in unpacking this project, I said, I won't be your partner because that will compromise my professional integrity. But what I will do is I will chair this process, because from a chair position, I can ask all those difficult questions. And if at any point in time you don't answer my 20 terrible questions, we have something to work out. And he's been really great. And so with the whole professional team, I said, I am not interested in sustaining the present, which is unsustainable. I'm interested in creating evolutionary futures. So that's the space you need to engage with me at. And I will explain to you what that looks like. And you will help me dream it up and make it happen.
We talk so much about partnerships.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. When you're in a partnership, there's political jockeying that you must do in order to be seen as working together.
Yeah.
But from a position of authority,
Yeah.
you can challenge, you can question, and setting up, doing any project, setting up the parameters of what that's going to look like is really important to do.
Yeah.
So there's the expectation control, you have to meet these expectations, I am going to challenge you, are all really good lessons of learning. Is there one thing that you would attribute your success to? A point in time, a decision, or a personality trait?
If it's a personality trait, I am really intrigued by who people are. So when I meet people, I try and look really closely, and I have an ability to perceive, or at least ask those questions. In fact, that's what my partner says. You always land up asking that kind of question that causes us to think about who we really are. And when I understand that, it creates the basis from which we can actually begin to create something.
What would you say is the most challenging aspect of your career?
I think it's all the different mindsets and worldviews that different people come from, and how you work to bring that onto one page for the purpose of what you're doing. It's around what I call creative conversations and common purpose conversations, and how you begin to facilitate them. And at the end of the day, so much of what I do is about really being able to create that common purpose conversation in what we're dealing with, from a space of inspiration, not from a space of fear, and that's the creativity, is when we get to the root of what is really important to us, we can begin to be excited about what we do and really work with it and push the boundaries and be willing to go wherever we need to go to make it happen.
I call this my edginess segment. Something in your career that you've had to do that makes you a little uncomfortable, but you have to do it in order to achieve the success that you have.
What's made me most uncomfortable in my career is when this developer approached me to work on this project. And I had really been struggling for about 2 decades working within the conventional training and kind of almost the culture of planning and architecture, which says that there's certain ways and there's certain constructs and ideological constructs and conceptual things that hold true for what you work with. And in my gut, I was feeling like, actually, the world is not working the way these things are saying that it should be working. And when this developer challenged me about the idea of creating a new city piece that went completely against that grain, I had to pause and really rethink so much of what I had believed in and really look at it hard and say, am I doing this just because it's a project opportunity, or is it really offering an opportunity? And I suddenly realized that actually I was trying to, even though I thought I was trying to push the boundaries, I was trying to find solutions in the same paradigm of the problem, in what I was doing previously. And actually that freshness of somebody coming and really challenging where you come from gave me the opportunity to step out and say, maybe there's a different way to think about this. And then suddenly a whole lot of possibilities. It was almost like there was a log jam that got unblocked and a whole lot of possibilities began to open up. And that started opening up and freeing up so many conversations, so that suddenly, from having the same conversations about how we think we're going to solve the problem, but we've done it for 20 years and not solved the problem, we now start seeing an unfolding of the whole range of possibilities that are coming out, and a different way of thinking about how we can begin to solve some of those problems of rapid urbanization and informal settlements that are the only way in which cities are being formed in Africa at the moment largely, and how we can begin to transform that game. So it's been really, being able to stop and say, maybe, every now and again you've got to stop and think, I've got to think again.
There was one thing you do differently in the pursuit of your success. What would that be?
I would share more. I would spend the time to share more. So thank you very much, Suzanne. I would definitely share more about what we are trying to do. Because it's in those conversations, in that sharing, that you widen and expand that opportunity for contribution.
What does success mean to you?
Success means to me to be able to both play the big game but still have the balance, so that my children are still getting what they need from me as a mother, that I can be a really great community player in my little community, that I can fulfill the kind of role that my friend who's suffering from breast cancer, who needs a really dear friend, can fulfill, that I can go and have that quiet dinner with her and be part of her fundraising team so that she can get the treatment that she can get. That's what success means to me. And then at the same time, be able to still be in that board meeting and challenge some of the highest leaders in the city and engage with them. Not just challenge them, but also engage with them and say, we all have a role to play.
How would you define leadership?
Interesting. One talks about it all the time. Leadership is about really pushing the boundaries. And then in pushing the boundaries to make things work better, also pulling together the energies and the people. It's about people at the end of the day. So it's about pushing the boundaries and creating that space of lightness and inspiration and fun, and then being able to pull people into processes with you, because you can't do it alone.
You've mentioned this word fun.
Yeah.
a few times
Yes.
throughout the interview, and I just want to explore that for a moment.
Sure.
Because people may not perceive as a professional service practice
Yeah.
fun. What does fun mean to you, and how does that play a role in your practice?
So I was involved in a different practice before this practice, and I worked very hard. I had fantastic results, and I was completely the dictator. Not very loved by my staff. They enjoyed the fact that we were successful and we were known in the market, and if you wanted to get a job done, you came to me. But I paid for it personally, with my energy, with my well-being. And so what I did at the end of that period when my child was born was I took a pause and I looked at how I had been operating, and I had a very wise counsel at that point. And I recognized that I was exercising in that world male energy in order to succeed, and that was not supporting me as a human being or other people around me. So I went on a journey to look at other women leaders in the world. I went and read all their biographies to try and understand who were those women who have worked in a way that has nurtured and built community fundamentally. Communities of people willing to work together to go those extra 500 miles we need to go. And that's what I've discovered in the last 13 to 15 years.
Wonderful. I'm glad I asked you that question. Can you name a couple of those biographies for our audience?
Well, Rosa Luxemburg, Simone de Beauvoir, Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir. I started this journey about 15, 20 years ago. So those are the ones that I've read. And then subsequently, I've had the opportunity to engage with some really great women in the work that they do. And I can see how they're using male energies or female energies, but also with the men that I work with. So, and I can now understand for myself. And often, when the men that I work with encounter me, they don't know what to make with me initially, because they see the way in which I operate as potentially a weakness, until they start experiencing the fun of working with me or with my team, and then they begin to understand. So the fun is about really doing serious things, but doing that with the lightness of being, and you can create that lightness of being.
Hard to do sometimes.
Absolutely.
But worth the journey.
Absolutely. We're never perfect.
No.
We're just who we are.
Could you provide 3 pieces of advice to women, leadership lessons that you'd like to impart to them if they're leading a project or initiative or people?
So I think it's important to really look at what you're doing and think about what is really the most important thing to do. It's a Zen lesson. What is the most important thing to do in this project now? And do it. And stand your ground for it. Believe in yourself and believe in what you've understood to be done. Be willing to be persuaded, and then engage with others around it. So stand your ground. Believe in yourself, stand your ground, and then do everything it takes to make it work. So if it means talking to the right people, learning the stuff, going on the internet, whatever it is that you need to do, and then getting the support, because you can get the support to actually do that. Because when you've hooked onto something that's really important, other people will see it as important too, or the people who see it as important will be willing to partner.
Okay, let's say you have a daughter that's 10. What words of wisdom today, based on what you know, would you give to her?
I would say to her to really be unafraid of what anybody thinks of you. To really connect with what you understand to be important. To go and find all of those people in your community that are kind and generous and willing to make a contribution to other people's lives. Go and be with them and learn from them what they're doing and how they're doing it. Because in those lessons you will see the things that are worth cultivating in yourself as an individual, and then live that.
What do you wish you were told at 10 years old?
That I was beautiful and gorgeous and amazing. I was told at 10 years old that I was ugly and too black and no Indian man will ever marry you.
What's next for you?
Building a city, building communities.
Wonderful. What words of wisdom would you like to impart to African women?
There's a depth of dignity and resilience and wisdom and huge generosity in the spirit of African women. Bring it out. Stand together and work together.
Thank you so much. Well, Gita has given us some really good insight today about not only architecture, but women and communities and giving back to those communities, which we have found pioneering women have this natural tendency to want to give back, which makes them just so much more beautiful. My name is Suzanne F Stevens, and I co-produce Wisdom Exchange TV alongside my husband, Michael K. Ginrich, and we're traveling throughout Africa, interviewing pioneers, trailblazers, and leaders of many. If you know a woman we should interview, please email us at info@wisdomexchangetv.com. Also, join us on Wisdom Exchange TV fan page and talk to us there, or you can talk to us on Wisdom Exchange TV as well, because now you can actually connect with your Facebook page through our site. And lastly, I would like to leave you with my words of wisdom, and I really love this concept of female energy and male energy. And the reality is you don't have to be a woman or a man. You just need to possess both of those things and know when you should use your female energy and when you should use your male energy to engage and to give back and to celebrate who we are. Thank you for joining us.